listeners, welcome to the 118th episode of Authors Bookstores, presented by A Mighty Blaze. I'm your host, Kimberly Hensle Lowrance. For the past 2.5 years, I have virtually traveled across the United States, Canada, and Great Britain with my partner, Joe Moldover, to support independent bookstores and the authors who love them. We do this by bringing to you conversations between authors and their favorite booksellers to shine a light on storytelling, creativity, and the small businesses that enrich our communities. I'm very pleased today to welcome author Gretchen Anthony and bookseller Mary Lee Delafield to the show. Oh, Mary, welcome. We're very, very happy you're here. Okay, so a little bit about our guest before we jump into questions. Gretchen Anthony is the award-winning author of The Kids Are Gonna Ask, a recipient of the 2021 Alex Award from the American Library Association. Her debut novel, Evergreen Tidings from the Baumgartners, was a Midwestern Connections pick and a Best Books pick by Amazon, BookBub, Pop Sugar, and the New York Post. Her new novel is The Book Haters Book Club, which came out in September from Park Row Books. Gretchen's writing has been featured in the Washington Post, Medium, and several other sites. She also lives, she lives in Minneapolis with her family. She writes and she lives. Mary Lee Delafield has been a bookseller. Mary Lee, do I have this right? For over 20 years?
Mm-hmm.
And the last decade has been spent at Warwick's in La Jolla, California. Beautiful, sunny Southern California. And Warwick's is the United States. It's the country's oldest continuously family-owned and operated bookstore. It was founded over
Same family.
Yeah, there's a wonderful link on the website, which we're going to put below, about the history of the bookstore. And we'll talk a little bit about that too. And the bookstore was founded over 125 years ago. I think Warwick's might be the oldest bookstore that we've had on the show. I don't know why I'm saying might be. It has to be.
Vroman's is pretty old.
We've had Vromans. We have had Vromans, but I think you're older.
Vroman's is pretty old. We might be in competition, but they are no longer owned by the Vroman family. So,
okay, well, excellent. So welcome to you both. And
Thank you.
Great. So before we hop into our questions, I just want to remind the audience that you are welcome to ask questions of our guests. Please post them below in a comment, and we'll get to as many as we can during our broadcast today. Okay, so Gretchen, let's start with you. I was saying in the little meeting room before we went live that when we invited you to be on the show, you immediately came back with, yes, I want to be on with Warwick's and I want to be on with Mary Lee. So tell us, what is it about? Because you're in Minneapolis, Mary Lee in the bookstores in Southern California. So tell us, what is it about Warwick's? What is it about Mary Lee? What makes this store so special? We would love to hear from you.
Well, okay. So one thing I have not told you, Mary Lee, is that Warwick's is actually, my best friend lives in San Diego, and Warwick's is her absolute favorite bookstore. And I never talked about that in any of my emails or anything, because we didn't know when I was pinging you, and I'll get into why I pinged you and all that. Anyway, later we had one of those little squeal moments, like, I love Warwick's, when I told her who was interviewing me. So the reason we wanted to reach out to Mary Lee is because one of the things that is at the heart of my new book, The Book Haters Book Club, is it's about an iconic bookstore in Minneapolis that was co-founded, in 1980. And one of the booksellers, Elliot, he sells books based on this philosophy that all it takes to turn a book hater into a book lover is putting the right book in exactly the right hands and at exactly the right moment. And I like to refer to him as semi-book world famous for doing that. And over the course of owning the bookshop, he begins to start a newsletter called the Book Haters Book Club, in which he tells stories about doing exactly that, putting certain books in readers' hands, and why he did that. And those newsletters run throughout the story itself. And as I was writing the novel, I kept thinking, I kept writing Elliot's newsletters, and I had all my own personal recommendations that I wanted to put into the book, but I just kept thinking, this is so skewed. This is like the Gretchen Anthony show about all the books that I've loved over the years, which is fine, but I wasn't, but it wasn't the Gretchen Anthony show. I wanted it to be broader than that. Plus, I have kind of an eclectic taste in books. I love a lot of humor. And so it took me almost an embarrassing long time to realize this, but I kept thinking, who can I turn to who would have all the right recommendations? And then it was like facepalm moment where I was like, I have made so many good friends who either shaped my life as a reader, librarians or booksellers who shaped my life as a young reader, or who continue to shape my life, or even as an author, who have been so influential and so helpful to me. And so I started reaching out to booksellers and saying, here's my character. I'm looking for a book that you might recommend consistently, or what's a favorite book to recommend. And I broadened. Mary Lee and I had not met before, and we still haven't met in person. It's wonderful to see you. But I reached out to some of my author friends and said, who are your absolute favorite booksellers and who should I reach out to? So I think it was Amy Meyerson who connected us, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you emailed me that. Yeah.
Yeah. So Amy Meyerson, who I have been lucky enough to meet, turned me on to Mary Lee, and Mary Lee and I exchanged emails, and you have wonderful book recommendations. And so it's just, I feel like writing this book was an adventure that I didn't experience, and I made even more friends doing it. It was really wonderful. So yes, so I hadn't gotten to meet Mary Lee, and I thought, ooh, this could be the perfect experience, or the perfect opportunity to do that, since I knew I wasn't flying to La Jolla anytime soon.
Have you been to Warwick's though?
I haven't been to Warwick's. No, I haven't. But like I said, it's next time I go, out to see my best friend in San Diego, you better believe that's where we're going. So yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, booksellers, we talk so much about how booksellers are valuable in making book recommendations, but maybe what people, I don't know if they understand that to authors, booksellers are also so valuable in offering advice on publishing, on what people are interested in reading, there's so many other ways that booksellers play an integral role in the life of an author. And this is the first I've heard of an author soliciting booksellers for content. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And go ahead, please.
Well, Elliot's a bookseller.
Yes.
I'm not a bookseller. I'm a book writer. I wanted to go to the actual booksellers, and many of them guided me on what it was like to run a bookstore day in and day out. So I did that kind of research too. But this was just the core of what they do. What would you recommend in this situation?
Wonderful. Wow. Now I'm so curious. Now I want to reread the book and know which books Mary Lee recommended.
Well, if you read the back, you'll see.
Yeah. The book, at the very end, I list all the books that Elliot recommended and who they were recommended by. The bummer for Mary Lee's was that I wasn't able to work her recommendations actually into his newsletters, but she, just because actually I did, but that one got pulled. I'm sorry. It got edited out.
It's okay. It's okay.
But I list all the stores, the bookstores, and all the booksellers. And so Mary Lee is listed in the book with my thanks and links to Warwick's. And my hope is that, my hope in doing that was that readers would actually go out and support all of these booksellers and bookstores.
Mary Lee, what is it about bookselling that has called to you? So you've been doing this for, we said at the top, like over 20 years. I mean, obviously, I would imagine having connections to authors is one, but what is it for 100%. You that this has been the right fit?
So I actually worked for 10 years at the Blue Willow Bookshop in Houston, Texas, when we lived there. And then when we moved here, I had a very good friend who knew the owner of Warwick's, Nancy Warwick, and she sent her an email and said, I don't know if you're looking for booksellers, but I have a friend. And the head of the book department reached out to me before I'd actually moved, and I had a job before we moved here, which was lovely. And I think that if you had told me when I graduated from college that I was going to take my English degree and I was going to parlay it into books for the rest of my life, I would have thought you were nuts. But how much better could that be if you are lucky enough to be in a position to sell something or market something or just give people something that you love almost more than anything else.
Yeah.
So for me, it was a true joy, and I feel so lucky that I could do that. Having said that, it's a little difficult to make a living as a bookseller in this world, as it is to be a teacher or a firefighter or many other jobs. So I feel very lucky that I have been able to do it for pretty much my whole career. So,
what has been the biggest change when you think about your career in bookselling and you think about the beginning when you started out to now? What's been the biggest change? What's been the biggest surprise?
Well, I really think that one of the real joys is that authors are rock stars. If you're a bookseller, authors are rock stars. And so, it's that moment where you have that rock star moment where you're walking through Book Expo and you walk by Ann Patchett, which actually happened to me right after she'd written Bel Canto, and you turn around and you're like, fangirl. And I think none of that has changed, except that I think that the pandemic actually broadened the world for authors. And while I am all about an in-person author visit, I am really glad that I can still see the authors that aren't coming to my town in a different way. And I think it sells books, which of course is what we're here for. I can't tell you how many people will come into the store and say, oh, I heard Gretchen Anthony this morning on whatever, Good Morning Minneapolis, and I need her books. And that, and they maybe for whatever reason hadn't even thought they wanted to read your book because they didn't know it was out there, but they hear you, they see you, they're in. So it's you are your book.
Yeah, I think that's true. It's something that as an author you don't necessarily prepare for either. I mean, I will say fellow authors are rock stars to authors as well. I was at a book event and walked past Mary Carr and I was like, oh my goodness. And I love her essays. I mean, she's a memoirist, but she's just like marvelously talented. And I had this like really, really bad moment where I looked at her and she is absolutely stunning. Like she is a beautiful, gorgeous person. But if you read her books, you know that she has been through a lot. And I had one of those, you should keep this isn't something you should say out loud moments. And I looked at her and I was like, Mary, you look so much better than you should. She was just like, so then she turned and was like, she was like, I take very good care of myself. And I'm like, well, it's obvious. I mean, I really, really tried to comb over it, but one of those dumb comments where you mean it as such a compliment and it just comes off as like, oh my God. So then she turns and she goes, meet Amy Tan.
Oh.
So I shoved my entire foot in my mouth. And then, because I'm like struck by author rock stardom. And then she turns and it's like, meet Amy Tan. And I was just like, okay, I think I need to crawl into a hole right now.
We have all done that though, Gretchen. We have all done that. We have all, and I think that there's a lot of grace that's given, right? Because,
so Mary Carr, if I ever see you again, or, please know that I would just meant it with such love.
Mary, who is the person, the author over the years that has made you tongue-tied? Or the author event that you had at Warwick's that was just like, your mind exploded because you were so excited that this person was there?
Let's see. I've been really fortunate over all these years that I've gotten to meet a lot of my, rock stars. I think Elizabeth Gilbert, because she acts like even if you're in a giant room of people with her, she acts like you're her best friend, and you're going to be talking to each other, and you're going to see her again because she leaves you with that you're my best friend and I love you feeling, which is very warming. The other interesting thing I will say is that we had Sean Penn, and he was so gracious and so kind to every staff member, which does not always happen when you have someone who comes to writing books from a different career.
Yeah.
He made sure that he said hello to everyone and he shook their hands, and they don't all do that. And it, I was a tiny bit surprised. It was unexpected and lovely.
Yeah.
So
doesn't necessarily line up with his public rep either.
No.
Yeah.
No. And some other people who you would think would be truly, truly lovely are very busy people.
Oh, that's diplomatic.
Yeah, I was going to say.
So Mary Lee, tell us, Warwick's has been in operation for 125 years, probably the oldest continuously owned family operated bookstore in America. Not many bookstores can last to 125 years. I mean, we've had bookstores on this show in the last 2.5 years that have since closed. I mean, it's a hard industry.
Yeah.
Tell us, what is it about Warwick's that has made it successful for so long? What's the magic?
Well, first of all, I did look this up this morning because I wanted you to know, Gretchen, that Warwick's originated in Mankato, Minnesota. That was its first home.
No kidding. I did not know that.
Yeah. It's been kind of in its current location since like the 1930s, but I went into work this morning because I couldn't remember the town in Minnesota and I wanted to nail that down. I think like every other bookstore, they certainly have had their ups and downs. I think that because we sell other products, it's not just a bookstore. I think that has been a blessing in many years, but I also think that she's been very willing to like figure out, the owner, like, how can we sell books in every possible way? How can we need a good online store, and we need to be, we deliver things to people's cars. I mean, it's the customer service element at Warwick's, as it is in all independent bookstores, it's just over the top. I mean, our whole thing is no one should ever have to wait in line, which can be very stressful during the holidays when you're a bookseller. But, and we have a very loyal, as did Over the Rainbow, we have a very loyal clientele who will come to us first before they will look for books in other places.
There's an extraordinary article I found about Warwick's that we'll put in the chat, that the store had a challenge a couple of years ago when the building was sold, and a group of customers,
investors.
So
right. Well, when it came time to renew the lease, they came and said that they had an offer on the building. And I believe that they had the right of first refusal. And she got a real estate lawyer involved who was also a customer, who went to some local customers and said, can we help? And they put together a group of people and they bought the building. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
That is loyalty. That is love and loyalty.
It is, especially, especially the way the world has changed in terms of how we buy things. And I don't, there's a lot of big box stores in the world, and it was very heartwarming, and it's lovely to see those people when they come into the store, quite honestly.
I bet. I
But there's
bet.
something different about bookstores, isn't it? There's something
Right.
so we find our community there.
Yeah,
Right.
it's where our people are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Gretchen,
Which I
that's
believe you mention in your book.
exactly, Mary Lee. Thank you for working with me there on the segue. I appreciate that. Just gonna set that up for you, Gretchen. That value of community is something that we see very much in the Book Haters Book Club. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about your new book, Gretchen?
Well, I started to tee it up like a little bit. So when the book opens, the like I said, it was started in 1980 by co-founders Irma and Elliot. And when they meet, they're actually competitive booksellers. Irma has taken $500 of her savings and bought her uncle's like delivery truck, old milk van or bread truck or something, and she repaints it and redoes the inside, and she turns it into she calls it Books Around Town, and it's a book van. It's a mobile bookstore. And then Elliot does the same thing, but he's on a three-wheel bike. And so he calls it Books on Bike Back. And over the course of a couple of summers, they keep running into each other at all these, they go where the people are and they keep running into each other. Well, they find out when they finally meet that it's sort of kismet. They don't fall in romantically in love, but they are meant to be together, and they open this bookstore. Well, as the book itself, the novel itself opens, Elliot has died. And Irma is in a position where she decides that she's selling the bookstore, and it comes as a huge shock to her daughter. She has two daughters. One of them works at the store, and one of them, for her own reasons, has sort of like fled Minnesota and wanted nothing to do with the store. And then Elliot's partner, Tom, is in shock too. He doesn't know that, he doesn't have any insight into why the store is closing. And what unfolds over the course of the book is the decision these three individuals, Lainey and Bree, Irma's daughters, and Tom form this like unlikely trio to decide not only whether or not to try and save the bookstore, but how to go about that. And, as always happens in books, hijinks ensue, and, discoveries are made. But one of the things that becomes clear that I wanted to beyond all demonstrate is that people feel so strongly about bookstores because it's where our people are. It becomes a community, and I think that's why we were talking about what makes a good bookseller before. I think that's why we latch onto our favorite booksellers, because it's like they whisper these little secrets into our ears. They get to know us, and they say, "I think this story would speak to you," or "I think this is what you need to hear that read or learn at this point in time." People meet in bookstores, and throughout the book, there's little anecdotes. And I didn't necessarily take the specific anecdotes from the booksellers that I was speaking with, but I made my own variations of them. But, babies are born in bookstores. That actually happened at Mrs. Dalloway's Books in Berkeley. I read a newsletter from them, and they were talking about how, a baby that had been born in their bookstore actually came back and was now a customer now. Babies are born in bookstores. Couples meet in bookstores. People have their first experiences of all sorts in bookstores. And the story itself too, as I went about developing these characters, I realized I write family comedies. And I realized that more than anything, this is a book about found family, even more than the family that we're born into. And I think bookstores as communities become found families for so many people as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Description of your book. One of the things I was curious about when I read the Book Haters Book Club is, what was the question that was in your mind, or the spark that something that I always think that there's a question that authors are trying to answer in their books. And I wondered what was that question for you, or what was the spark that started this story for you?
The spark actually came out of this community question. And it was my last book, The Kids Are Going to Ask, had just come out, and it was July 2020. And I live in Minneapolis. So in July of 2020, we were still very much in the throes of the George Floyd tragedy and all of, you know, it's just everything that that brought to our city, and everything that we really do need to reconcile and change. And I grew up in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, and then moved away for almost 20 years and swore I was never going to come back. And then in 2011, my husband and I came back. He has a theory that all Minnesotans like hear a siren call at some point, and we all kind of like migrate back because there's something lovely and magical here. And so in the midst of all this upset and the you know, the trashing of these neighborhoods, I, like so many thousands of my fellow Minnesotans, was watching all of these neighborhoods get destroyed, and knowing that what was getting destroyed was not just these physical buildings, but the places that these residents relied on, and people's livelihoods, their family businesses were being destroyed, and any sense of safety that people may have felt in these neighborhoods was being destroyed. And the very first, I don't mean to compare it in any means with the tragedy that went on with George Floyd. But one of the first versions of this book, I think, I was channeling so much of that, because I ended up sitting down and writing a scene. I didn't know where I was going, but I wrote a scene in which there's a store that's kind of like central to a neighborhood, and the sewer line explodes and literally like shuts the entire neighborhood off and covers the entire neighborhood in sewage. But one place sort of becomes a place of refuge. And in my head, that was the bookstore. And thankfully my editor sort of read this initial pitch, and she's like, well, I think we might want a different, instigating incident. I don't think we want to talk about a sewer explosion. But that was the spark for me. Like, in these times of upset, is there one place that we can go, and what would that look like for me? And for me, it became Over the Rainbow.
And in this book, I learned just before we went live that there's a character from a previous book of yours that makes an appearance. Can you tell us, Mary Leah, you were excited about this. So can you tell us a little bit about Violet and who she, obviously I apologize, I haven't read that book, but I enjoyed Violet on the pages. And then to find out that she exists in another book, I'm intrigued. So please tell us about how you've connected your books together.
Oh, do you want me to talk about it, or Mary Lee?
Both of you.
Okay. Well, I would love to hear Mary Lee's impressions. So
Okay.
I'll let her go first. I love
So I will say that Evergreen Tidings from the Baumgartners is a great book to read during the holiday season. So since you haven't read it, now is the perfect time to pick it up.
Excellent. Thank you.
And it has, Violet is one of those characters that you love to hate and you hate to love. Like that's just who she is. Until you finish the book. But it has the best ending of, I've read a lot of books, I'm not going to lie. And it has one of the best endings of any book I've ever read. And I can tell you that every single person who I put it into their hands, they come back and they say to me, oh my God, thank you so much. But because you love to hate her and you hate to love her, I was sorry to let her go. So when I was reading this and I realized that I was going to get another little taste of this wonderful character that has stuck with me for years, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, quite honestly.
Oh, that's excellent. That's such a compliment, Gretchen, when you hear that there's a character you've created that stayed with someone, especially a bookseller who's read like probably a million zillion books.
I know. And to hear you say that about the ending, I kind of have shivers. Thank you, Mary Lee. Seriously.
Oh, it's such a great ending. And it was funny because in this book, you have a little bit of I guess a twist. We can call it a twist. I mean, there are some things that you don't see coming. And I will say I was waiting for them because of what I had read. I was like, oh, there's still something. She's going to pull something out of the hat here. And you did not disappoint. So.
Oh, good. Oh, good.
Mary Lee, how do you think Gretchen did in the Book Haters Book Club describing the life of a bookseller? Did she nail it?
She did very well. And it's funny because as a bookseller, we have that apocryphal story of the customer that comes in and said, "I'm looking for that book. It's yellow." And we go, "Oh yes, here it is."
Yeah.
And it happens all the time. People come in and say, "I want that book. I think it's on the New York Times bestseller list. It's blue." Because some people are just very visual, but there was a lot. I will say it made me think a lot. It made me grateful to be a bookseller too, because I think that it's retail and in the grind, sometimes you can forget that you can change somebody's life.
Yeah.
And you get lovely feedback. I mean, if you're selling someone, I don't know, glassware, they don't necessarily come back and go, "Oh, I love my glasses."
Right.
But people come back all the time to tell you what they think of your book recommendations. And you get a lot of feedback, and it's very gratifying. And I think she completely nailed it.
Oh, I'm so glad. I was really nervous putting it out.
I bet.
Because I thought, my target audience in many ways are the exact people who are going to be able to nail everything I either got right or got wrong about this. Yeah. Maxwell Gregory is one of the booksellers who is associated with A Mighty Blaze.
Yes.
And love Maxwell. And she was so gracious, among other people, but Maxwell in particular sat with me for hours and walked me through a lot of the nitty gritty. I had worked in a bookstore many years ago, so I remembered the pace. But it was more of a big box retail. It was a Borders Books. I hadn't ever done where I had worked in smaller boutiques. I had never done an independent bookstore. So I wanted to make sure in particular that you never want to misrepresent anybody.
Yeah, of course. One of the things that, I think is so special and so important about indie bookstores is this connection that you have with booksellers. And my local indie, I know, their bookseller there is dangerous. I walk in and I leave with 5 books that I did not intend to buy because she's so good at making connections and hand selling me books that always turn out to be wonderful. And Mary Lee, I wonder, what's your approach to hand selling? When you have someone come in the store, how do you go about sussing out what's a good fit for them? Beyond someone coming in saying, "Oh yeah, I want the blue book that's on the New York Times bestseller list." How do you discover the person to put the right book in their hands?
So I think, I think this is very common. Well, what have you read that you've liked? Mm-hmm. Because I think that also will give you a sense. I mean, you kind of have to suss out, are you fiction? Are you nonfiction? Are you mystery? Are you literary fiction? How hard do you want this book to be?
That's a good question.
Because some people want to read really hard and some people don't. And it's all awesome. And I feel if they're really forthcoming, it's really not that hard to kind of go through your catalog and be like, all right, these 3 probably, take a look at these 3. Yeah. I do think to go to the Book Haters book club thing, I do think a lot of people come in and say, "Oh yeah, I want a book," but they're not really readers. And then it's a little hard. I will say it's a little harder than to put something in their hands.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they are the ones that always surprise you because you think, "Oh, okay, I'm going to recommend something that's popular," and then they pick up it's kind of the most outlying kind of most indie title that you have on your shelf. Mm. So it's, but if people are forthcoming, it's usually not that hard. I also think bookseller secret, I don't read the bestsellers. I read the books typically that need to be hand sold. I mean, I read the things that I've read reviews or the publishers have sent me that they think are going to be big, but they're a debut or it's not a John Grisham so I try to read the things that are not super mainstream. I save that for my vacations because I still want to read them, but
right.
And as an author, that is the magic and the gift that you give to us because because I'm one of those authors. I'm one of those smaller authors who needs to be hand sold, and it's just like, every time you pick up one of my gifts or my books and you recommend it, it is a gift you are giving me. And as well as a gift that, you are giving to, not a free gift, but
Of course. Well, and the fact that you
giving
put my
to a
name
reader.
in your book, I recommend it all the time. I go, look, my name's in.
But it is such a great point because it's also how booksellers influence the market.
Yes.
And how you keep books alive that could disappear had someone not championed them.
Right.
Yeah.
Other than an expansive marketing budget, right? So it's such a vital role.
And we felt it during the pandemic when the bookstores were closed, because the booksellers weren't out there hand selling for us. Yeah. So we felt it acutely.
It would have been tough to have a book come out in 2020. It would have been it would have been tough. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there were a lot of authors who did have books come out in 2020, and that's why Mighty Blaze was born, because
thank goodness.
And other entities too, because it was just so difficult to shine a light on stories that we didn't want to lose. So, so that's another great segue into Gretchen. In your book, there is a fictional bookstore we've talked about called Over the Rainbow Bookstore. Yes. And you have to read the book to see the connection to Judy Garland. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to let readers discover that on their own. But there's been a lot of interest in Over the Rainbow, even though it's not a real bookstore. Can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing to bring a little bit of the bookstore to people who
So one of the things that I found readers began to resonate with, which thrilled me because I love it myself, which sounds a little braggy since I wrote it, but it just, the apologies, gosh, Mary Carr moment. Anyway, the tagline for the bookstore is books and rainbows are where dreams come true. And that it just made, actually, I don't think I wrote that. Elliot said that to me. Like, Elliot was one of those voices as an author that came to me, and he told me, I mean, I'm not hearing voices, but he really was one of those stronger characters, very much his own Violet Baumgartner. Violet Baumgartner was very clear in her voice too. Elliot was very clear. And a lot of what I wrote in Elliot's voice just kind of came to me at those moments where you're not thinking about writing, you're in the shower, or you're, making breakfast or what have you. And that was one of them. That was Elliot. Books and rainbows are where dreams come true. Because yes, we make a mention of Judy Garland. And I won't give that spoiler away, but one of the things about Minnesota is that Judy Garland actually was born here and grew up here, got her start here, and then her family moved away. They owned a movie house in Grand Rapids, Minnesota, which is way, way north. And they say she's the home of Judy Garland because she had her first stage performance there. So he's this big Judy Garland fan. And I think that's why it came to me, is because, she personifies that, like she was constantly looking for her dreams to come true and constantly chasing her rainbow. And so that tagline, readers really resonated with. So we made it into, I had this brainstorm and I was like, ooh, let's make the Over the Rainbow logo. So we made the Over the Rainbow logo, and then we put the tagline on things. So you can actually buy merch with it on there, like t-shirts and mugs and stuff. Because the logo I just had a lot of fun with because it's so retro. It's like 80s, big fat 80s rainbow and stuff like that. And I'm an 80s girl. So that's been, all the nostalgia in this book has been a lot of fun for me.
Well, we're including the link to the merch below for those people who are looking for holiday gifts. Speaking of holiday gifts, this is always a time of the year when super organized people right now are already buying holiday gifts. I may have started or feeling inadequate that I haven't started enough. But one thing that I always give for the holidays, of course, books. And so I'm wondering, for the two of you, what are the books that you'll be giving people this holiday season? Or what are you reading right now that you really love and you'd love to draw attention to? Our audience always wants to hear book recommendations from our guests. Mary Lee, what's on your list?
Well, of course, this one.
Thank you.
I will say I think I've already gifted Evergreen Tidings to everyone I know. So that one I will just be suggesting other people gift. So let's see. So I loved Mercury Pictures Presents by Anthony Mora, and his Constellations of Vital Phenomena is another book that they were afraid wasn't going to get a lot of play. And so they tried to put it in everyone's hands early. And for me, that was just such a phenomenal book. And I like that one. I also like The Kingdoms of Savannah. And I know that you had the author on with the bookstore in Savannah, E. Schaefer. His name is George Dawes
Green.
Green.
We can do it.
So I like that. And I also think that Sarah Addison Allen's Other Birds is a great choice because it's a feel-good book, and I like to give people books that make them feel good at the holidays. So
excellent. Those are great recommendations. Thank
you.
Gretchen, what about you? What are you hoping to give out this holiday season or get this holiday season?
Well, one of the things that I love to give as gifts, just it helps me bypass the whole "what kind of reader are you?" is I give book journals, which because I like to keep a journal throughout the year of what books that I've read and my impressions of them. So often to my book club gal pals, I'll often get like a blank, and I always buy them from my independent bookseller.
That's a great idea.
And then but one of the books that I'm going to be actually gifting this year is by a fellow Minnesota author named Peter Guy. It's called Ski Jumpers. And Peter is an entirely different writer than I am. He is very quiet, but tells these quietly beautiful, immensely talented writer, tells these family saga stories, and this is about two brothers, and they literally are ski jumpers, but it's really about the story of these two brothers and as they kind of unfold the mysteries of their lives and of their father's life, and it's of course set in the upper Midwest, and Peter's a beautiful landscape writer. So his book, I love to I love to tease him when I see him because his book came out the exact same day as mine did. And every time my publicist would reach out to a bookstore, they'd say, "Oh, we'd love to have you on that date, but we just booked Peter Guy." So after a while it became this joke, like Seinfeld with Newman. I'd be like, "Peter Guy." I'm going to give his book away now for Christmas.
Well, thank you for those recommendations. We're putting links below in the broadcast so you can go check them out. I personally have read books that have been recommended by booksellers and authors during our show. I have a stack. I'm such a sucker for a good recommendation, and I know our guests are too. Gretchen, tell us, you have a newsletter. What are you working on now? You have a newsletter that we'll put the link to below that people can sign up to learn more about your writing and your other activities. And is there another book in the mix that we should put on our calendars to keep an eye out for?
Yes, you're going to love the title of this one.
Okay.
Are you ready? The title is Book 4.
Okay, I do love that one. That's great. I love it because it means you've had 3 books before that were published.
Yes, exactly. We're no title yet. I am actually making progress on it. Look for that in spring of 24.
Excellent.
Okay.
So we're coming to the end of our time, and Mary Lee, the last question always goes to the bookseller. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Becoming a successful bookseller. It's part hard work, part luck, and part what else?
Oh, there's definitely a secret sauce. Because There's definitely a secret sauce because it's retail, but it's not retail.
Not-
Just because you can sell clothes, you can't sell books. You have to be willing to actually devote many of your off hours on reading your product. So if you don't have that, I also think there's just something about it. You know, when you walk into any independent bookstore, like they all kind of feel the same.
Yeah.
They all kind of have this thing, but it's like a secret sauce. It's like that crazy thing we all have that we're going to work in this business and thrive in it if we can.
Well, it's sort of a blend of, it's a blend of art and business. You know, it's this,
Right.
And you have to have the appreciation for the art in order to be successful at the business. Whereas there are other things where you can sell tires and maybe not appreciate tires, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so
I also think you have to remember it's retail. I mean, like you have to remember it's a business.
Yeah.
And so if you can find that weird, like sweet spot, which fortunately many people are able to, it makes you a successful bookseller.
Well, clearly you have beaucoup de special sauce because you have been such a successful bookseller. And I'm so grateful to spend time with both of you today talking books.
I'm so grateful. Thank you.
About Warwick's. And to our audience, thank you also for being with us today. Also, a special thank you to Julie Gerstenblatt, who is behind the scenes producing for us today. To our audience, if you liked today's show, and we certainly hope that you did, please subscribe to A Mighty Blaze on Facebook to get notified about all of our shows. Or you can hop over to our website, amightyblaze.com, to sign up for our newsletter. It goes out once a week and gives you the rundown of all of our episodes. I will also say, if you're headed to Southern California anytime soon, first of all, lucky you. And then second of all, please make a stop at La Jolla. In La Jolla, California, to go to Warwick's. It sounds like a really terrific place, a very special place. And we're lucky to have booksellers like Mary Lee, authors like Gretchen, and bookstores like Warwick's. We're off next week because it's Thanksgiving here in America. So to our American viewers, enjoy the holiday. Hope you get lots of pie. But we'll be back on November 30th. It'll be our third annual holiday show. Both Joe and I will be on the air together, battling it out for our favorite reads of the year and our holiday shopping recommendations. We hope you'll join us then. Until then, be well and keep reading. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.